Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight on At Issue. It will be a busy night tonight, so let's get straight to some of the issues we'll be covering. From pre-K to the Capitol, education was the hot topic in downtown Jackson this week. Everyone wanted to talk about reading and scholarships, even guns in the classroom. We'll look at several of the issues and speak with our guests about what these issues could mean for our state. And then more movement on the Medicaid front. Surprising to some, Medicaid expansion did not die. We'll check in with some folks in the know to find out what's next for the controversial issue. But first, some late-breaking news out of the office of Insurance Commissioner Mike Cheney this evening. As you may know, the Insurance Commissioner has been at odds with Governor Phil Bryant over the creation of an insurance exchange and whether we should have one of those in Mississippi. Well, the decision has been made for the Commissioner. MPB News' Jeffrey Hess was at Commissioner Cheney's press conference just a couple of hours ago. And Jeffrey, tell us what happened.
4 exchanges. Now, all of them, except for Mississippi, have been approved. Ours was rejected. The feds had cited a dispute between the commissioner, Mike Cheney, and Governor Phil Bryant over whether or not the state should run an exchange. Cheney received word late this afternoon that we would not be approved, and he says he's disappointed, saying that he thinks this is political.
The denial by HHS for a state-based exchange speaks volumes about maybe their true intentions in Washington, D.C. And those intentions are not something that I like. We have taken HHS and CSIA at face value, that they would work with us, but I fear that we've been unable to trust them at this point. And Americans need to be able to trust in their government. I feel betrayed at this point.
Because of this decision, the federal government will come in and run an insurance exchange for Mississippi. An exchange is mandated by the healthcare reform law, where private individuals and small businesses can shop for and buy insurance. And as a result of that, we will have a federally administered exchange. Back to you, Wilson.
Jeffrey Hess of MPB News, thanks. A multi-layered issue will be interesting to watch. As we mentioned, though, education has been the star at the Capitol this week. There are several issues on the table. Most are agreeable to politicians in both parties, but expect some fireworks. Mississippi ranks 48th when it comes to education, and now state legislators have decided it's time to act on a whole slew of educational issues.
Our plan is to focus on charter schools, appointed superintendents, third grade reading gate, things of this nature.
And that's just to start with. This week, the Mississippi House and Senate have been busy in committee, passing through several bills aimed at improving the state's struggling education system. One such issue, the option for public school students to use public money to transfer to private schools.
Well, if there's not a public school within the area that's of the quality, if it's a D or an F district and the student's looking for another opportunity and it does not have the resources, it'd just be one more tool in the war chest to try to educate our children.
This, of course, is not to be confused with the Charter Schools Initiative, which has been a source of debate between Democrats and Republicans for years now, but looks poised to pass through in this session. The hows and the whys are still to be worked out. Another education issue on the board, believe it or not, religion.
And I don't understand the logic behind not allowing our school groups, our clubs to have organized religious activities, Bible studies, or whatever they want to do after hours, use the facilities. And I'd like someone to step forward and tell me what's wrong with having prayer before a high school football game.
Kids need to express those religious sentiments at times, even if we disagree with them. And they certainly have that right under current case law.
Another big topic at the Capitol, guns in schools, not with resource officers, hidden ones in the hands of teachers or administrators.
It allows a local school district to set up their own marshal service, if you will, of unmarked individuals, whether they are teachers or administrators or workers around the school, and just to have a secret force within that school that's armed.
This bill is an obvious reaction to events like the Connecticut school shooting, something that Representative Moore thinks can be prevented.
Time results in dead bodies, and there's no police force or sheriff's department in the state of Mississippi that can react and be on premises faster than you can kill 15 or 20 young people.
Most of these education bills are being put forth by Republican lawmakers with some reservations by Democrats. There are several other bills still being discussed by both the House and Senate because, as Senate Education Chairman Gray Tollison says, there is much that needs to be done.
You know, the efforts to try to reform the system are never ending. It won't end after this session and hopefully the next few sessions of trying to improve education. When we're 48, we've got a goal to work towards, and that would be first. So as you can see, education is clearly a talker at the Capitol, and now it's a talker here on the At Issue set. We're joined by two esteemed guests to talk about some of these proposed measures. First up, from Mississippi First, is Executive Director Rachel Canter, a former Teach for America vet. Rachel is a Starkville native and a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania and Harvard Kennedy School of Government. And on Rachel's left is, Mike Sayer, co-founder of Southern Echo, which is a grassroots leadership, development, education, and training organization working to empower communities of color and low wealth in Mississippi. And we thank you both for being on At Issue this evening. Let's start with Senate Bill 2395, which passed the Senate today, that would put some money into a pre-kindergarten program. And Rachel, you actually wrote that bill. Is this an effort toward state-sponsored pre-K in Mississippi?
Absolutely. So this bill would create a state pot of money that local communities could get together and form local collaboratives of public schools, private providers, and Head Start, and then apply to the state to draw down state funds to serve 4-year-olds in their community based on state standards. It was a historic vote today, the first time this bill has ever gotten out of appropriations and to the floor. And we are just ecstatic that almost all members of the Senate voted for it.
Why has there been resistance in the past to state pre-kindergarten?
I think for a couple of different reasons. Obviously, people have always talked about, can we afford it? Can we afford it? But I think people are coming to the realization that we have to start early if we want to be successful and we want our students to be successful. I also think that for a long time, there were a lot of competing visions for what state-funded pre-K should look like in Mississippi. Should it be just public schools? Should it include private providers? And the lessons we've learned from other states across the country that do have state-funded pre-K is that almost all of them use a collaborative model to do that. So they bring all providers into the system, and it strengthens the options for children and families.
Well, you mentioned private institutions, and Mike, you support a program that would provide tax credits to help some students go to private institutions. Is that correct?
No, I do not support that.
Okay, pardon me. It's an issue that has been brought up, and why do you not support that?
Because we don't think that public funds should go to support private schools, and the tax credit opportunity scholarship bill is essentially a backdoor voucher system, and it will provide funding for private religious schools as well. Public money should not be going for that, and there's a serious constitutional issue about whether they can do that under the Mississippi Constitution.
Let's talk about charter schools. What are your thoughts on the value of a charter school and how it differs from a program like that?
Well, we're opposed to charter schools here in Mississippi. We're not taking a position on what's done in other states, but there are lots of different reasons why charter schools are not the right path for us at this time. In the first place, it will divert huge sums of money from the traditional public schools. Secondly, the national data shows that only 17% of charter schools outperform traditional public schools, and 37% of them underperform traditional public schools. So there's a real question about what the measure of value is for the charter schools. In Mississippi right now, there are two bills, one in the House, one in the Senate. There are three options. The legislature could pass the House bill, could pass the Senate bill, or could pass neither bill. We propose that they pass neither bill because the Senate bill provides for private education operators to manage the charter schools on behalf of a nonprofit owner. Secondly, and they also provide for students to be able to attend a charter school from anywhere in the state. The House bill is more restrictive. It only permits up to 15 per year, but in 10 years you'd have 150, you could have potentially another 150 school districts which would double the number of districts that we have.
I want to get to one other topic here on education, and that's the third grade reading level and the effort to sort of reevaluate students when they get to that level. Rachel, tell me about that and the progress of that legislation.
Sure. So I do want to get to the charter bill because actually I wrote that bill, and so I'd like to take issue with some of the things that Mike said. I don't know if you want me to wait and do that until later, or do you want me to talk about the third grade?
Quickly, we're just about out of time, but go
Sure.
ahead. We can take that now.
Well, the 17% statistic is actually very much misreported. It's not a national study. It's a study of 16 states, and 41 states have charter schools. The study also found that there are states with charter sectors that outperform their traditional public sector. 5 states in that study showed that. So I think the lesson from this study is not that charter schools don't work, but that charter schools that are in states with great laws do work.
All right. Well, thank you. We could spend another half hour on this issue alone, I think, and I appreciate you both spending this brief amount of time with us tonight. We thank you both. We still have a lot of ahead tonight, including that update on Medicaid that we promised you. The option to expand the program is still out there. We'll give you the details. Plus, we know this will shock you, but there are lawmakers out there wasting your time and money. We'll have a list of some of the this week's biggest offenders coming up. And while we're on break for a few minutes, grab your iPad or your laptop and check us out on our various social media accounts. If you're into Facebook, head on over to facebook.com/IssueMPB. There you can find all the latest political news affecting Mississippi, as well as polls and information about At Issue. Or if Twitter is more your style, check us out at IssueMPB. Same as Facebook. There you can catch up on all things political and Mississippi.
This February, explore African American history. Follow Whitney Young in his fight for civil rights.
He understood power and he understood people.
Remember television pioneer Alex Haley and his groundbreaking series Roots.
It was riveting. He was a master storyteller.
And celebrate the talents of Rosetta Tharpe, godmother of rock and roll.
She was a phenomenal showwoman.
It's all here during Black History Month on PBS.
On Masterpiece Classic.
It seems strange without Sybil here. She's watching.
Welcome back, Mr. Bates.
You can't have expected to stay my valet once Bates was released.
I assume your father disapproves.
It's the business of parents to worry.
Are you sure about Rose?
I'm quite looking forward to it. There she is.
I can make Downton safe for our children.
What about Papa?
Downton has existed for hundreds of years. But the last time you took an interest, you ruined the family.
Downton Abbey on Masterpiece Classic.
Sunday at 8 on MPB.
She's been kept alive for at least 4 days, bound, gagged.
Find me that missing girl. We're gonna blitz the lot of them until somebody cracks.
2 people with a throat cut. Are you really gonna tell me that that's a coincidence?
You did it, didn't you, Lucy? We're gonna find out who's responsible and we're gonna put them away.
Sunday at 10 on Mississippi Public Broadcasting.
Ding dong, the bill is not dead. Well, the Senate version anyway. We're talking about Medicaid. Here's the latest. It's the political issue that could in Mississippi, Medicaid expansion. Republicans don't want it, Democrats do. And with one party in power, it seems like it should be a done deal.
All the information I have received indicates that it is an enormously expensive undertaking, and my consultation with the governor, lieutenant governor, there is no appetite to expand it.
And just last week, it looked like it was all she wrote for Medicaid expansion in Mississippi as the House voted it down. But there was a twist. Democrats voted down that bill too. Why? Better options down the road.
Democrats, we want to deal with it. We want to support the president. We want to support the initiative and go from there.
I mean, regardless of who you voted for president in the last election, if you look at the numbers, if you look at the federal money that would come into this state, it makes sense for Mississippi to do this. Not only would it improve health care, but the economic benefit of putting up 90 to 95% of the money coming from the federal government into this state, it's a good deal for the state of Mississippi.
But it is those dollars that have so many people confused and so many Mississippi politicians divided. Lieutenant Governor Tate Reeves himself is clear on the numbers.
It's also a potential expenditure to the state general fund over the next 10 years of somewhere between $600 million if you believe one report, or $1.6 billion if you believe another report. Irrespective of it's $600 million or $1.6 billion, it's not something that the state general fund at this point can afford.
So where does this leave state leaders? Right now, at an impasse.
Well, the House effectively killed the Medicaid by not taking the measure up. This bill at least keeps the agency alive for 1 year. But at the same time, if we're going to truly do what we need to do, we need to expand Medicaid. And anybody who cares about health care and the ability to get adequate care for your family or anyone else without having to go to an emergency room ought to try to support the expansion of Medicaid.
I think that what we should do is keep our options open at this point, just as a matter of procedure. It's always good to have more options rather than fewer.
At the very least, Mississippi lawmakers have more time to figure things out and keep their options open. Often the best people to ask about what's really happening with issues like Medicaid are the reporters covering the story. So we brought in two of the best here in Jackson. Of course, we have MPB's own Daniel Cherry. He is a stalwart of the news department. Also joining us is Emily Wagster Pettus of the Associated Press. She is the state capitol reporter for the AP. Both Daniel and Emily join me now to talk about Medicaid, and we'll bring them in a little bit later to talk about some other issues. So, Emily, we talked about time there. Is this something that's going to be drawn out through the entire session, you think?
Yes, I think one thing that a lot of lawmakers are waiting for right now is some sort of very clear and definitive answer from the Federal Department of Health and Human Services on what will happen to the payments that go to hospitals for taking care of uninsured people. This is a very big deal to hospitals. A lot of hospital administrators are worried about losing a lot of money on this. And so at this point, even though the leadership is saying the state can't afford it, they might start feeling some political pressure once they're hearing from the hospital people back home.
Daniel, we hear a lot of numbers on both sides of this, that it would cost too much, but that it would create so many jobs, and that could offset it. So who do you believe, and where do the credible numbers come from, and how do you make, if you're a lawmaker, how do you make an educated decision on all this?
Well, for lawmakers, I think it has more to do with a matter of theology and where your political stance is in a lot of this. The numbers, it depends on which study you look at, because Republicans tend to favor their own studies and Democrats tend to look at their own. One number that isn't very much debated is that it would add about 300,000 low-income Mississippians to the Medicaid rolls. How much that costs, that's what's up for debate. The governor and some other Republicans like to look at a study that I believe says it would cost $4 billion over 10 years. Democrats tend to look at a study that says it would cost $1 billion over 10 years. It will cost money, but for the first 2 years, the federal government would pay 100% of it at least. So there's some debate on saying Mississippi needs to get it. If they're going to expand, they need to expand early to get the full benefit.
You mentioned the Department of Health and Human Services. Does the insurance commissioner's announcement today about the health insurance exchange have anything to do, have any bearing on this Medicaid issue that also involves the Department of Health and Human Services to some degree?
They are actually separate issues. They're both tied up in the federal health care law that the president signed in 2010, but they are separate issues. And so what happened today with the insurance exchange, the result of that very likely is going to be that instead of having a state-run exchange, it will be a federal-run exchange. The issue of whether to expand Medicaid is a decision to be made by the legislature, and it is separate.
So, Daniel, any predictions on which way it's going to go? Put you on the spot here.
It's going to be a hard sell in the House. We can rest assured that it will be debated very hotly. But passing it, that's going to be a hard one.
Of course, we'll follow it right here on At Issue and MPB. Thank you both for being with us. We'll bring you back here in just a little bit.
Thanks.
Still ahead on At Issue, a few stories we couldn't help but share. Ever wonder what all those legislators do all day? Well, we know they're busy most of the time, but sometimes, well, they waste time too. We'll tell you how. And then Daniel Cherry and Emily Wagster Pettus will be back with a few other stories making legislative waves this week, including attaching GPS devices to sex offenders and hiding public records. Intrigued? Well, stick around to get all the details.
How can sandstorms in the Sahara transform the Amazon rainforest over 5,000 miles away? Why does a vast undersea waterfall in Antarctica lead to a feeding frenzy near the equator? Eyes in Space reveal the answer.
Satellites turn invisible processes into visible things we can see and then understand.
Earth from Space on Nova.
Wednesday at 8 on Mississippi Public Broadcasting.
Canada's vast plains, where the biggest buffalo and wolves in the world do battle.
We still got the wolves out there.
Here, one wolf pack will struggle to maintain the family business, bringing down buffalo.
We got a buffalo wolf situation here for sure.
It's an ancient spectacle of offense and defense, but its future is uncertain as the modern world closes in.
Wednesday at 7 on MPB.
Hello, I'm Gwen Eiffel. Join PBS NewsHour for live coverage and analysis of President Obama's State of the Union address and the Republican response. Judy Woodruff will anchor the PBS special broadcast with analysis by Mark Shields and David Brooks. That's Tuesday, February 12th, here on your PBS station.
Tuesday at 8 on MPB.
Now, we have to be careful here. Our legislators are a hard-working bunch, but sometimes, well, the things put on the docket at the Capitol seem a little frivolous. And since we always fill you in on the hardest working of the legislative bunch, we thought it only fair to share those bills that are not necessarily a great use of time, like this one, the Animal-Human Hybrid Bill. It would outlaw intentionally creating human-animal hybrids. It was okay if it happened accidentally, like Spider-Man and the radioactive spider, but doing it intentionally in a lab would have been breaking the law if this bill had passed. But don't worry, it died in committee. Another bill that won't be making its journey to passage is the much ballyhooed sovereignty bill, House Bill 490. That's the bill that got a lot of people talking about whether Mississippi had the right to cut the federal government out of any decision making. It was a throwback to the days of civil yore. Like the human-animal hybrid bill, this one did not go anywhere. We've talked a lot tonight about education and Medicaid, but our legislators do work hard and they cover a lot of topics. Here's a look at a few other things they were able to comment on.
The purpose of the bill is to put teeth in our sex offender registry. Right now, if you went down to the Hinds County Sex Offender Registrar, they would tell you that there are over 500 sex offenders living in Hinds County, and only 16 of them are non-compliant. Well, without standing there, knocking on that door every night, how do you know who is compliant and who is not? Ms. Edgard's tragic death showed us that we need to tighten up the system. This is a way to do that by targeting the ones who are trouble to begin with.
Half of all elected superintendents in the United States are from Mississippi. And we certainly have some capable elected superintendents, but frankly, we just have counties that don't have the resources, the talent pool to get what I would think is a sufficient and quality superintendent. Sadly, it comes down to who has the best political network, not who's the most qualified. And under an appointed superintendent system, your talent pool is every qualified administrator in the United States, as opposed to the 37 people who are capable of fulfilling the job requirements in your one county.
The House passed a local option sales tax bill. Are you looking forward to maybe getting to debate that on the Senate floor?
The entire House passed it, or just Ways and
Well, the Ways and Means.
Well, surely there's at least 2/5 of the people on the House floor that have got enough sense to know better than that.
The infringement happened here when the government of Mississippi told law-abiding citizens that they have to have a concealed carry permit to carry a weapon on their person that's concealed. They force you to get a license. Then they say, we're going to take your information, and on top of that, we're going to make it public, exposing you to harm. It's not a slippery slope. In fact, we're standing on solid ground under Mississippi law. There is currently an exemption under Mississippi law from the Public Records Act. If you apply for a medical license, your information stays private. If you serve on a jury, that information stays private. And those same reasons, because it's personal private information and because it can expose you to harm, are the reasons why we need to exempt concealed carry information from the Public Records Act as well.
Our early childhood education is good. I think charter schools stinks. I think it's a way to basically pay for private education through public monies. Simply put, some of the other initiatives are so bizarre that they're bringing out. I think it's a disguise and a shield against the real issue, which is we should be trying to fund the current educational formula and uplift our public school system. It's the law of the state as well, MAEP, and we funded it twice in 13 years.
With those issues in mind, let's go back to our crack reporters for their take on the action down at the Capitol. Again, we're joined by MPB News' Daniel Cherry and the Associated Press Capitol reporter Emily Wagster Pettus. And thanks both for y'all. Thank you both for being here again. And let's talk about, Emily, the local option sales tax. There are cities and municipalities who've been clamoring for this because they want to make local improvements. So they can't do it without levying a small sales tax generally. And this always has a hard time at the Capitol. Is this going to be its year, you think?
I wouldn't bet on it being this year. This is an issue that's been brought up for a number of years now, and you hear the same arguments against it repeatedly. Of course, they showed the video clip from Senator Bryan, who's very much opposed to this. And if there's a debate in the Senate, we can count on quite a vociferous speech from him against it. His argument is that it's not only the people who live in the cities who would be paying the optional 1% sales tax, it's also people who come in from the rural areas to shop there. And so if you live in Holmes County and you go shop at North Park Mall, you would still be paying the tax if Ridgeland decides to do that, just as one example.
I see. Daniel, the Lenora's Law, named for Lenora Edgard, who was murdered by her neighbor who happened to be a sex offender who was not properly registered. This law would put more teeth, I guess, into Mississippi's existing sex offender registry, right?
That's right. That's what Senator Longwitz was trying to do with that bill. Currently, sex offenders have to register at a residence, but the state doesn't really have a way to check in on that. So he is proposing putting a GPS tracking device in sex offenders who have broken the rules as far as registering their place where they live. And that would make sure that they could keep track of people who have shown that they don't stay put.
I see. Let's talk about concealed carry. This got a lot of people surprised. I think was it the New York Times who wanted.
I don't think it was the New York Times. It was a newspaper in New York, however,
that wanted to publish the background or the personal information of people who had concealed carry permits, and this got a lot of people talking all over the country.
It did, and the bill. There was a bill in the House that passed by a huge margin. The bill in the Senate died in committee. That was Senator Longwitz's bill as well, but they say it protects gun owners because they say by printing, the possibility of printing who has concealed carry permits, you open the door for thieves to come in and try to take their guns. The opponents, mainly the Mississippi Press Association, says it's a really slippery slope to start closing government records.
Well, let's talk about school superintendents. Emily, this has been an issue that's come up in recent years, that our school superintendents ought to be appointed and not elected. Does this one have a chance this year?
I think that this might actually have some momentum this year. I don't know whether this is the year it will pass, but I do think that they'll have a healthy discussion about it at the Capitol. There's been, of course, a change of leadership in the last couple of years, and I think that the people who are in charge of the House and Senate at this point are quite interested in making this change.
Because what's their motive? What do they hope to accomplish with something like this?
What they say is they really want to focus on bringing in well-trained professionals to these jobs. And, not to say that there aren't some elected superintendents who fit that description, but as the lawmaker pointed out in the video clip, it often comes down to local politics, and it could be who's the better politician who gets elected, not who's the better administrator.
Daniel, with the remaining seconds here, any other issues you think we need to be watching in the coming days and weeks?
Well, you caught me off guard with that one.
There will be plenty, I'm sure.
There will be.
Well, we'll watch it all, of course, right here. And once again, we want to thank our guests tonight for joining us, both Emily Wagster Pettus from the AP and Daniel Cherry of MPB News. Also, our earlier guests, Rachel Canter of Mississippi First and Mike Sayer of Southern Echo. Each of you brought a little something special to At Issue tonight, and we thank you. We also thank you for watching. Of course, we couldn't do it without you. We'll see you back here next week, where every single thing the legislature does will be at issue. Good night.